All right, so in this video, I'm going to cover passing data into our templates, and I also want to explain what these weird little curly braces and percent signs are and what we can do with them in order to make our content in our templates dynamic. But before we do that, let's go ahead and fix up one little thing here. So I want to make this projects page our homepage because right now we have projects and then a single project, but when we go to our root domain, we get this error. So I just want to fix this up and make that projects page our default until we change something later. So let's go into our urls.py, and in order to make this our homepage, all we do is set that to an empty string. So we still keep the name right there as projects. That needs to be left alone, but the empty string means that this is going to be our root domain. And the reason why that's our root domain is because in the root URLs file, remember this was inside of our app, and this is that root url.py file. And this one, we simply include all the URLs from projects. So that's an empty string. So when a user goes from here and into here, it's still going to be that home page. So now if I go ahead and go to port 8000, this is our home page. Just wanted to fix this up. So for the template tags and variables, what are those? So Django, for its templating engine, I said that wrong in the last video. I said templating Jinja because of Jinja, that confused me, but it's its templating engine uses Jinja. So Jinja is its own library. It's used in different frameworks, but it's basically a way to output content and have some kind of business logic in our template. So let's go ahead and look at this. So these two curly braces right here, double curly braces and an opening and closing tag, this is how we pass in variables into our template. So in this case, we see my name is, and then we pass in a variable, and then my last name is, and last name. So it's just a way to pass in variables. So any content we pass in the template will wrap it in these curly braces right here, double curly braces, and then that content will be output. Now, this would be the output. So if we pass in John into the template, it'd be John Doe, my name is John, my last name is Doe. So those are just variables, and that's all those do. Now, there's different ways we can access objects here. So let's say that we passed in an object into the template. We can actually access that data inside of these variables. So let's say we had an object or a dictionary. We can get like person.name. So my object.attribute, and an attribute would be a name or an age, anything like that. So we can access that data inside of variables. Now, the other one is going to be tags, and these are a little bit different. And this is basically a way of adding Python-like logic into our templates. Now, it's not just Python, it's used in other languages and frameworks, but in our case, we can basically write if conditions, for loops, else statements, and so on. So let's look at this. So if in this case, we're checking if a user is authenticated. In this case, when we write a condition, we do the curly braces, percent signs, and the weird thing about this is we have to close our if statement. So when we're using tags, we have to, almost like in HTML, have an opening and a closing tag. So in this case, we check if the user is authenticated. If they are, we simply render that user's name. So we can also do for loops. We have filters, which we can do with these pipes here. Django has built-in ways of doing this, and we'll go through quite a bit of these. So we have tags and variables. Tags let us have some kind of logic in our templates, and variables simply output data. So with that being said, let's go ahead and actually get some data of our own in our templates. So we'll close out our URLs here, and let's go into our app, projects app, and into view. So the first thing I want to do is just pass in some kind of message. So we'll just do message or MSG. Let's just do that. And we'll just say, hello, you are on the projects page. Okay, so we have a message. How do we get this into our template so it can actually be seen within the projects page? So what we can do here is simply, as the last parameter inside of the render function or method, we have a request, we have our template name, we add in a comma, and we can just pass in a dictionary. So we'll just say MSG as the key, and then the actual message. So whatever we call it here is how we would access it in the template. So if we said message here, the variable is MSG, but the actual name here for the key is message. So let's grab this right here, save it, go into the template, and let's just do this. Let's pass that inside of our template. So we'll pass in the message here, Now if we go to our page, there we go. Hello, you are on the projects page. So in this case, we'll just say this. Let's just do page, and for that variable, we'll just do projects, and we can change this up for a message. And in the template, we will say inside of a paragraph tag here, let's just do hello, you are on the, and then we'll just do page. So we can take this variable right here, it's double curly braces, and then we pass in that value here. So we'll just do page. So what page is the user on? Well, we won't know until we render that out if we had that variable in multiple areas. So this is weird. Okay, that didn't work. Projects page. Okay, so for some reason that did not render. Let's go ahead and try to refresh that. There we go. So this value right here is dynamic and would change depending on what we added here. So if we refresh that, there we go. That's how we pass in some data. Now let's go ahead and write a condition in our template. So let's just say age or number. Let's just do a number. Okay, so we're gonna write a couple of conditions here. So we'll just say the number is 10. And in this case, once this context dictionary, so it's just a dictionary, once it gets big, what I like to do is create a variable called context. And then I just like to put it out here. So I'll do context, set that variable, and we'll pass in another value. So let's just do number. And now what we want to do is check a condition. So we're going to write an if statement. So let's just do this. We're going to write a condition. So this is going to be in the curly braces and then percent sign. So this means that we are using a tag here. We're going to write some logic. So we're going to say if number is greater than 10. So we'll say if number is greater than 10. Then before we actually continue writing our logic, we want to write an end if statement. So we'll do end if. So we're closing that if statement. Now in here, we'll say if the number is greater than 10, we'll just create a paragraph tag and we'll say number is greater than 10. So we're checking some logic. So let's go ahead and see this. So if the number is not, let's just do this. We'll create another tag here and this will just be else. So basically Python-like logic wrapped in these weird tags. So we'll just do number is less than 10. So now let's go ahead and check this out. Let's set this to 11. And if we check our template, first time is not working. Did I turn off my server? I must have had turned off my server, or I have some kind of error. Okay, context, we didn't assign that. So let's go ahead and see what's going on there. Now this should work. So let's see. Number is greater than 10. So what if I change this value to 9? Let's go ahead and refresh that. Number is less than 10. So we created a condition. So we can even put an elif statement. So what if we said this? If number is greater than 10, render out number is 10. And then let's just do another tag here and we can just do elif. And we're just going to say number is exactly 10. So if the number is 10 exactly, so in elif, I forgot we need to add in a condition. So we'll say if number is equal to 10, save that. Let's see what's going on here. If I refresh it, I need to assign a value, or I need to make that number 10. And let's see that change here. So we'll just set that to 10. And if I can pull up the page here, number is exactly 10. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. We're able to pass in variables. We can create some kind of conditions. So let's separate these, separate the else statement, and there we go. So we have an if statement, elif, else, and then we have to close any end if or any if statement. So we just have to close it. Now for the last part, what I want to do is show you how we can actually output more dynamic data, and this will be a list of dictionaries, and we're just going to output some fake content here. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and just get rid of this paragraph right here. And we'll just create some kind of line break. Let's just do this. Let's put an HR tag, and I'll delete this content later at some point, but for now we'll just put an HR tag, and we want to list out all of our projects. So let's just do H1 and we'll just say projects. Okay, so we have projects here, and what I'm going to do is just paste in a list of dictionaries. So we're going to paste that in just above our view. So we have a variable called projects list. You can write this out here. I'm going to leave this somewhere in the GitHub repo, so I'll probably link it up here, and that's just going to be like helper content. But basically we have a list and we have 1, 2, and 3 dictionaries. We have an ID with a title, a description, and we just continue that. So let's go ahead and render this out. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this projects list, and it's not specific to this view, so it's outside of the view. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pass that in. So we'll just do this. We'll just do projects, and remember we access it in the template by its key. So we're going to take these projects here and let's render these out. So what I'm going to do is create a list. So we'll just do UL, and we're going to create a for loop. So can you guess how that's going to be? So in this case, remember our if statement had to be closed off with an end if. So how would a for loop be ended? So in this case, we're going to do 2 percent signs for project or project. Okay, there's a T at the end. And then just like the if statement, we need to close that. So we're going to say end for. So instead of end if, we do end for, an opening and closing tag. Now, what do we want to do on each iteration? So on each iteration, let's just do this. We'll put out an li tag like that. And we're just going to output for project in projects. I forgot to close that out, and we need to put an in there. Sorry about that. So for project in projects, let's go ahead and output a list item. So let's just do this. We'll say name. And in this case, we're going to pass in that variable because on each iteration, that's going to be a name or a variable. And let's just do project.title, not the name, but the title. And let's see what happens. So if I go back here, if I refresh that, there we go. And I need to change that to title. So if I just do title here, what happened here? Okay, so the page refreshed funny. There we go. So we have a title and e-commerce website. So look what we did here. We looped through a list of dictionaries, and we can access the attributes by the dot notation like that. So let's say we want to output some more information. What's the next value here? So let's say we want to output the description. So we can go in here and we can just do project.description. So I'll just paste that in. And there we go. On each iteration, we are outputting data. So that's how we can output data. So we're going to do one more thing, and then we're going to actually create a database and render out some real data here. So we're going to finish up with this boring stuff here. I'm just trying to show you how this works, because once we query the data, it's going to look a lot like this. We're going to access lists and variables the same exact way from the database. Now, what I want to do here is I want to actually render out a project in the page here. So this is going to be a weird example. We're actually going to access this list based on the ID that gets passed in through this primary key. So in this case, let's just do this. We'll just say project.obj or project obj. So that's going to be a capital O. And we're just going to set this to none. So at this point, we have no project. Now let's go ahead and create a loop in here. We're just going to say for I in project list. So we're going to access the project list. And from this list, we're going to say if I, so the iteration, which is just going to be the dictionary. So if I, and then the ID value, that's how we access the dictionary in Python. So if the ID value is equal to whatever is in the primary key. So I hope this makes sense. We're trying to find a project or a dictionary inside of that list with that key that equals to be whatever that ID is. So we're going to grab that and we're going to check if we found a match here. If we find a match, then what we're going to do is we're going to set project object to I. In this case, I is the project on each iteration. So let's test this out. Let's go ahead and actually output some of that content. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this project object. We're going to pass it through the context dictionary into the template. So if we found one, it will be rendered in the template. And let's just do this. Let's take out obj right there. So project is going to be project object. So if I save this, pay attention to what's going on here. We're just going through that dictionary. I can go into single object and let's just output something in the template. So let's just do this. We're going to say project title. So we'll do project dot title, and then let's output a description. So this would be the equivalent of like a project page and actually outputting some content. So we'll put in a paragraph tag, and here we're gonna do project dot description. And then let's put some kind of line break so it looks a little bit better here, or a break tag. Let's just do BR, and that's gonna create some separation. Now, what's gonna happen here if we go to a project with the ID that exists? So right now in this list right here, we have ID 1, 2, and 3. So let's check my server. So I have no errors at this point. That looks good. And let's just do this. So we'll just do project and then pass in the ID of 1. So there we go. We have a fully functional e-commerce website. If we go to 2, we see the portfolio site. 3 will be the social network. So what's happening here? We're passing this ID into the URL parameter here. This right here inside of our URLs is a dynamic value called PK. So we go into this view right here and we pass that in here. So this is 1, 2, 3, and whatever we decide it to be. When this value gets passed in, we simply go into that project's list of dictionaries. So we go through these and we see if we have a primary key that matches one of those. Once we do, we set the ID and we pass it into the template. Now, what happens if we go outside of that index or go for a number that doesn't exist? Well, we get nothing at this point. So I'm gonna close this off with one last part. So we're gonna talk about URLs and actually linking dynamic content up. So remember, we gave our URLs a name here. So this is called project and project. So those are the dynamic values, and that's actually the name of the URL. So if you've worked with websites before, you may have seen this right here where if we wanted to add a link, let's say we actually want to send a user to a particular project. In this case, let's just wrap a link around this title here. So let's just create an A tag. Let's take this closing one and we will put that right here. So when we create the href here, you've probably seen something like project, and then we can pass in the project ID. So this will actually work. So let's do this first. So in this case, we're going to pass in the variable, and then we'll take the project ID, project.id. Remember, we are accessing this value right here. We're going to access that ID, and we're going to pass that into the URL here. So let's see what that looks like. So if I refresh that, there we go. Look at these links. This is actually working. But this isn't exactly the Django way of doing things. Django makes this a little bit easier for us, and I'll explain why they're doing what they're doing. So in this case, what if we change this ID? What if we put some kind of pretext to this? What if we said project dash object or something like that? I don't know, something like this. Well, what would happen is I would have to go to every single template where we have this output, and I would have to modify this. I would have to say project dash object, and then that just gets really annoying. So what Django did for us, in order to not have to update that in the templates and to be able to access this content dynamically in our views and other parts of Django, they allow us to name our URL. So as long as we access this name, this can be whatever it wants. It doesn't matter. As long as we access it by the name, which probably won't change if we stick to that, then whatever we update this to won't take effect. So let me show you what I mean. So in this case, doing things the Django way, we would use a tag for this. So in this case, we're gonna do the 2 curly braces, %, and we'll double that up. So opening and closing, we tell it that this is a URL tag. And then we can do single quotes, and we can just say project. So that's the URL name. Outside of the quotes, we can pass in the dynamic value. We can just do project.id. Now, if we try to use a double quote, this will not work. So if you use single quotes in here, use double quotes out here. If you use single quotes out here, use double quotes in here. So look at that. We give it the name and we pass in that dynamic value. So if I save this and I modify this, or if I try to run it, let's see what happened here. It looks like I had an error. Hopefully I didn't screw something up too bad. So project, that's called project here. So maybe I didn't save that. Oh, I did project's ID. Okay, sorry about that. So there we go. Now these links are still working. So if I did update this value for some reason, let's say I decided to just call this project-object. Let's test this, not objects, but object like that. If I go to my template, I don't have to modify anything because the name has not changed. So if I go in here, if I refresh that, the links are still working. So if I inspect this, this is what Django outputs, project-object and then the ID. So hope that makes sense. Let's just go ahead and revert that. Let's change this to project here, and that should be it. So that's it for this video. What we're gonna do is actually start working with the Django admin panel. We'll start working with the models in models.py, and we're gonna create our first database table and run some migrations. And it's gonna start getting fun from here because we're actually gonna start working with real data.